resources to elevate the community's quality of life. Arts United is a very interesting organization. Its scope of services not only includes being a United Arts Fund, but it also provides business services, financial, back office services. It also manages a number of facilities, a very significant arts campus in downtown Fort Wayne. It also offers health insurance through its 18 membership and has a significant role in the arts and culture community. But as importantly, if not more importantly now, and why she's a valuable speaker to have at this Leadership Summit today, is that she's been working with the leadership and partnership of Northeast Indiana and Greater Fort Wayne in the development of not only a cultural plan, which I had the privilege of helping her with a colleague of mine, but also to help actually create the leadership and the development of a community that includes a rich and vibrant cultural life. Prior to running Arts United, she was campaign and donor service manager for the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. She's been a fellow for the League of American Orchestras. She has a Master of Arts in Philanthropic Studies, a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Affairs. She is a strong leader in regional leadership. She's brought the creative sector together to really foster and community development. She sits on the Regional Opportunities Council of Northeast Indiana's regional partnership. She is on the board of directors for Greater Fort Wayne, and she's on the Downtown Development Committee. And the reason why I think it's important, and she has an important story to tell, is her perspective on what's happening in the creative community from her background. She has direct experience in integrating the nonprofit and for-profit creative organizations within a community. She's a thought leader, she's a driver of the creative economy, and she's helping to forge a new business model for an arts organization, a creative service organization that actually sits at the regional development table. So I'll introduce you happily to Susan Mendenhall.
Okay, I'm a little overwhelmed by that. And thank you, Christine, for your very warm introduction. And thank you, Sixto, for the opportunity to come check out Houston. What a great community you have here. I want to tell you a little bit about my speaking style. I'm going to ask you to engage with me. I don't want to talk at you. I want you to be part of this conversation. So we're going to have some Q&A after the conversation, but we're also going to have spontaneous Q&A during it. I hope that's okay with you. So if you're catching yourself mid-chew, I'm perfectly cool with that. That's good. Let's see if I can figure out the thing. All right. One of the things that's really exciting about this gathering, I think, with the Center for Arts Leadership is we have the opportunity to take information that we gain from academia about the practice of arts and culture and the creative economy and implement it as practitioners who are doing the work actively. You all are practitioners, and I applaud you and thank you for the important work that you do. Today we're talking about paradigm shifts. We've talked about, and we're trying to put a shape to this thing that we're calling the creative economy, right? It's a little bit of an amoeba shape in what we're trying to describe. Let's try to put some terminology around it and try to put some historical context around it. That's the goal for my presentation to you today. We are, as a creative sector, experiencing a paradigm shift. And so I want to ask you a couple questions. First, and these are questions for you to be considering throughout this conversation. First, how can creative nonprofits, creative businesses, and individual artists come together to powerfully leverage arts and culture for the growth of Houston, especially in a diversifying economy? And secondly, what does it look like for art and culture to be a leading force in the 21st century? One of the words that I would have loved to have seen in that word cloud is the word relevancy, because that's really what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the relevancy of the creative economy. Is this a thing? Mm-hmm. And one of the words that you can use for relevancy is value proposition. So I want to talk to you about different paradigms and the value propositions for the creative sector in those paradigms from a historical context. And then I want to show you some evidence of this creative economy paradigm shift that we're experiencing today. So the definition from Forbes of a value proposition is a positioning statement that explains what benefit you provide, for who, and how you do it uniquely well. In other words, why are you relevant? Why does somebody need your product, service, or organization? As we unravel this issue, I want to challenge you with two other questions. First, what is your organization or your business, personal or otherwise, what is your value position? Why does a customer buy your product, or if you are a nonprofit, why should a community support your mission? And secondly, what is the value proposition for the entire creative economy? Why should the community care about support by Houston's arts, culture, and creative sector? So any parents of toddlers in the room? Yeah? Do you know this toy? It is the most frustrating toy for a 1-year-old and for an adult. I want to talk a little bit about spinning wheels. This toy, you spin the wheels, you spin the gears, the caterpillar never goes anywhere. It's the most frustrating thing. Another similar mental image is the hamster wheel. And I want to talk about the spinning wheels of proving relevancy, of proving a value proposition. So questions for you, and some of this is buzzwords, and as just a caveat, we're not talking about you, we're talking about people you know. So questions about the people you know. Have you heard these buzzwords? First, have you heard the term, I really think the creative economy should have a seat at the table? Yes? Raise your hand if you've heard somebody use this phrase. Okay. And does it feel like they're always frustrated because they don't quite get there? Yeah? Okay. And I'm talking about all these tables. We've got economic development tables, civic and community planning tables, legislative agendas, social transformation, education, pre-K and higher ed. Okay, second buzzword. We want to tell a more transformational story. Yeah? But, of course, we're not talking about you, we're talking about people you know. We're telling a more transformational story, but delivering the same outcomes, generating more operating support for the same activities, being on this treadmill, spinning our wheels. Okay, third one. We need to use this transformational story to generate new revenue streams. Revenue streams. Have you heard this one, this buzzword? Yeah. We spend a lot of time and energy generating new revenue streams, doing the same work that we've always done so that we can earn more income, sell more tickets, put more butts on seats, generate more contributed revenue. That means mobilizing more donations, legacy gifts, and finding more tax revenue, collecting more in local, state, and federal tax dollars. And it's true, we all have, the truth of it is, we all have P&L statements, right? We all need money to be able to function and fulfill our missions. This is critical. This is a critical component. So in chasing the money, we've spent a lot of time developing a lot of paper, but finding very little progress. And I want to challenge you to think about, is this a symptom of our current business models, or are we seeing a grander paradigm shift in the way that the creative economy is conceived and is functioning that might mean that we need to evolve a little bit as a sector? So about a year ago, a gentleman named William Dershowitz, I'm going to call him William D because I can't say his last name. He published a piece in The Atlantic called The Death of the Artist and the Birth of the Creative Entrepreneur. And in this piece, he describes 4 paradigm shifts in respect to the role of art and in respect to the role of artists. And he describes the artist and the value proposition of that artist in that time period. So the first time period I want to talk about, the first paradigm, is the age of the Renaissance. This is the age of discovery. So during this time, who's the artist? We've got a picture of Rembrandt here. The artist was really a craftsman. The idea of an artist hadn't really evolved yet. This was a craftsman, old world craftsmanship. The value proposition for this artist was tradition. And the value proposition was established by the marketplace. Who's paying this artist? And who paid artists in the Renaissance? It was really the Medicis, the church, or the king, right? This was a very different time period. The concept of art and the concept of craftsmanship really forms a lot of our fundamental thoughts today. You think about the root word of art is to join, or to fit together, or to make. The term playwright is executed in the same way that we've got shipwrights or wheelwrights. Fashion, to fashion something together. So a lot of these root words that we still use today were formed during this period. But the artist's value is judged by the patron. So shifting into the second paradigm, this was the age that William D. describes as the age of romanticism and revolution, the late 1700s to the early 1900s. And during this shift, William D. describes this as the rise of the solitary genius. The artist was no longer the traditional craftsman. In fact, the artist was called to seek a higher plane, to reject tradition, to reject craftsmanship, and to seek something new and innovative and different, originality. And it gave this rise to this idea of art for art's sake during this time. Fine art emerged as a unitary concept for multiple disciplines, dance, theater, visual, music, that seek a higher truth. You think about other pieces that were developed at this time. La Boheme, the story of La Boheme and the starving artists was very indicative of this time period. And the value proposition of the artist during this time period was determined by the marketplace, which was the social aristocracy. So the artist was paid through a feudal dependency of the social aristocracy, and the artist was challenged to avoid the market, which means avoid the patrons, avoid the church, and I love this quote from William D., and it's sullying entanglements that might taint the art or prevent the artist from seeking a higher truth. So this is the age of the avant-garde, right? The age of Gertrude Stein and the Parisian salon. And we still kind of pine over this age, right? We still love this idea of art for art's sake. We still love the idea of the artist having an opportunity to seek truth and being the truth tellers in our community. And we still value that value proposition. Okay, and then we enter into the third paradigm. The greatest generation in America survives 2 world wars, and America becomes a global superpower. Art institutions rise to build America as a cultural superpower during this time. So what he describes this as is the post-war cultural boom, the rise of the cultural bureaucracy. Symphonies, museums, operas, these all developed during this time. And then you have a whole other layer of cultural bureaucracy that is developed to support the symphonies, the museums, the operas, and the ballets. You've got arts councils, funding bodies, foundations, magazines, awards. We have a lot of bureaucracy here that is intended to hire artists full-time and provide them a paycheck. So as art was institutionalized, so was the artist. The artist is now valued by technique, hard work, professionalism, climbing the ranks, accumulating credentials, building a resume, serving on boards and committees, collecting prizes and fellowships. And we began to prize professionalized training. So in the same way that a lawyer or a doctor or another profession seeks professionalized training, now you can do this with an MFA or PhD in art administration. So we've developed this cultural bureaucracy. And who places the value on the artist at this time? It's the experts, right? It's the cultural bureaucracy that is providing the paycheck to the artists. And this is not just a nonprofit phenomenon. Certainly, nonprofits did this, but popular artists were paid through the for-profit bureaucracy in the form of record labels, agents, managers, publicists, producers, galleries. We see this across the board. And the community had access to art through the cultural bureaucracy. That's very important. They didn't go directly to the artist. The community goes to an intermediary institution to consume art. And that intermediary institution is able to define what is good and what is bad art. And this is the quote from William D. that I think is really interesting. The artist's value is judged by the bureaucracy of institutions that were put in place to cushion artists ideologically, economically, psychologically from the full force of the marketplace, so they can continue to seek a higher truth, to be creative. It's kind of a backward way of thinking now that we're talking about a creative economy, isn't it? So now we go into the fourth paradigm, and this is what William D. is describing as the rise of the creative entrepreneur. He sees this as an indicator of the democratization of art. Anybody can be an artist, anybody can sell. There is no mitigating institution in between the artist and the consumer. So I want to tell you a little bit about the story of these two ladies. Has anybody heard of Vera Bradley here? Yeah. Vera Bradley is a Fort Wayne, Indiana company. It is now publicly traded. 30 years ago, Barbara Bradley Backgard and Patricia Miller, two people I enjoy and I love, I know them personally, they founded Vera Bradley to create, if you're not familiar with the company, quilted cotton luggage, handbags, and accessories. So those really bold patterns that you see in airports, that's Vera Bradley. In 1982, they were sitting in the Atlanta airport, like many of us have, and they noticed that there was a lack of feminine luggage. Each of the women invested $250 for a total of $500 and formed the company, naming it after Barbara's mom, who was a fashion model in the 1920s. They started it in Barbara's basement. By 1999, the bags were sold in all 50 states, in Europe and Japan, and today, Vera Bradley is a publicly traded company with annual net revenues of over $509 million and with an employee base of 2,800. This has gone from a small creative organization, small creative company, to being a huge part of the Fort Wayne, Indiana economy. And this is very indicative of a lot of companies that we've seen rise during this time in Houston and in many, many communities throughout the United States. The value proposition, according to William D., as the rise of the creative entrepreneur, is art as a consumer good. And artists are valued and prized by their versatility, by their ability to perform on multi-platforms. It's not enough to just be a storyteller. You need to be a storyteller and a dancer and a designer. It's not enough to just have an art gallery. The art gallery needs to function as a co-working space and a coffee shop. You know, we've got these emergence of this creative economy that is somewhat amorphous because of its versatility and breadth. Another phenomenon that's happened during this time, I was talking to my brother who's a graphic designer, and he told me, I was telling him about this presentation last night, or a couple days ago when I was home visiting, and he said, yeah, when I got my first job, my boss told me, hey, Eric, you know what the difference is between an artist and a designer? And Eric said, well, it should be the same thing. And his boss said, it's a paycheck, which is not really ideal, right, for the company that he was working for at the time and has since left. So, interestingly, a whole new institutional structure has developed in this fourth paradigm to support these emerging creative entrepreneurs. You think about Etsy, think about iTunes, online marketplaces, creative incubators. Are there any creative incubators in the room? Any organizations that have a creative incubator? Yep. Collaborative spaces, co-working spaces. And in academia, fine art programs now offer courses not to train artists in just art, how to make their thing, but also how to sell their thing. We see Jeff Bezos doing Shark Tank, pulling them up by your bootstraps kind of thing for creative entrepreneurs too. What William D. talks about is the democratization leading to producerism. So anybody has the means to sell in the fourth economy. And the value of the art is not defined by a cultural bureaucracy, but by the consumer. So after I read this article, I began thinking, okay, where is evidence that this is true? And I want to challenge you with the idea that creative economy research is the evidence that really substantiates this rise of the creative entrepreneur and this shift into the fourth paradigm. I want to share with you a little bit about Fort Wayne, Indiana. We are the 77th most populous city, which makes us a very solidly middle-sized city. We have a regional population of 732,000 people, and our region is 11 counties, so we're pretty spread out. Our creative industries are about 4.5% of all jobs in Northeast Indiana, so very similar to Houston. What we're seeing, though, and what our creative economy study specifically looked at was 1099 employment. So 1099 is self-employment, and we have some ability to be able to measure this now in different kinds of ways. What we found in Northeast Indiana is institutional employment, payroll employment was stagnating, but 1099 employment in the creative sector was going through the roof, far outpacing 1099 employment in any other industry. And creative sector self-employment, 1099 employment, is 53% of total creative sector employment in Northeast Indiana. It's 53%. That's more than people who are employed by institutions. And what's interesting about this is the way that our economic development folks have taken this idea of the creative economy and said, you know what, our biggest challenge in Northeast Indiana is population loss. In the next 10 years, Northeast Indiana is likely to lose 10,000 members of our workforce. And comparatively, now that you know that we are a solidly mid-sized city, that's a lot to Northeast Indiana. We don't have mountains. We don't have an ocean. We don't live in a sunny climate. So what do we have to sell our city? It's the fact that we have an awesome arts and cultural scene. And so our economic development drivers are positioning the creative sector, and the creative millennials specifically, as our pitch to the nation to say, hey, come live in Northeast Indiana, come grow here. We have companies like Vera Bradley and Sweetwater Sound and Matilda Jane. You can be innovative, you can be in a creative industry, and you can make it here. We're also talking about diversity and inclusion, not so different from North Carolina. So a few additional trends in Houston, and Christine already covered a lot of this from the creative economy research for Greater Houston. But the data here also supports the rise of the 1099 worker. The research didn't pull this out specifically, but if you look at the top employers or the top occupations that are growing, photographers, musicians, writers, and authors, consider how many and what percentage of those are self-employed. So the rise of the creative entrepreneur. And the economic value proposition that I'm hearing a lot about in Houston is diversification of the economy, right? In an economy that has huge reliance on the oil industry, the energy industry, this is an opportunity to provide some diversification for the Houston economy, and also to talk about issues that impact us all, like equity and inclusion. Now, my home base, I'm a fundraiser by trade. This is what my master's degree is in philanthropy. And so I went back home to home base for me, and I looked at evidence of this paradigm shift in philanthropy. And something really kind of hit me, that the greatest generation in fueling the post-war cultural boom they just assumed that future generations would always continue to fund nonprofit organizations and fund their operating support, their operating gap. Nonprofit organizations really do rely on philanthropic support. Many orchestras are 30 to 60% in need of philanthropic dollars, which is a huge number. And we indeed have seen the proliferation of nonprofit organizations, especially in the last 30 years. So about the same amount of philanthropic support, huge growth in nonprofit organizations, and yet millennial giving trends are bucking that assumption. Millennials are more interested in giving to causes, not institutions and not general operating support. They want to see tangible results from the gifts that they make. They don't want their dollars to just go into what they perceive of as a black hole. So you give rise to the idea of crowdfunding, where you actually see the needle being moved by your $20 gift. Millennials also see their contributions as being much broader than dollars. What they see is being able to be an advocate on social media to increase your network pull, to increase an artist's capacity to sell as a contribution. And they're less likely to think about this in terms of the nonprofit, for-profit difference, but in terms of their buddy on the street that they want to support and see the needle move for their friend who is an artist. I've also found social capital research to be really indicative of the fourth paradigm. Are you all familiar with the idea of social capital? This is the idea. It came out, it's been studied for a long time, but Robert Putnam is really the preeminent scholar in social capital. And the idea is that trust in society and the ability to form social networks in civil society has economic value. So it's that old phrase, it's who you know, not what you know. In communities that it is easy to trust each other and to form social networks, those communities tend to be more economically prosperous than communities in which trust is inhibited by crime or by other factors that lead to that. And what Robert Putnam did was look at Gallup polls and surveys and census data from 1950 to 2000. And what he found was an incredible decline in indicators of supporting traditional institutions. So decline in memberships, decline in volunteerism, and decline in trust in those institutions. And yes, there is data that supports that information, which is fascinating to me. But he said that this activity is changing. More people are being connected to each other by technology. And we all know this intuitively. The data supports that. Additionally, and this is something that William D. points out in his essay in The Atlantic, is that a new bureaucracy has been developed and is heavily dependent on technology to fuel the development of the creative entrepreneur. It's not filtered by anybody, it's not evaluated by experts, but by the opinion poll. If you buy something on Amazon or on Etsy, you have the opportunity to submit your opinion about the thing that you're buying or the artist that's producing that thing. So the artists are now focused on building broader networks, not necessarily the professionalism of his or her craft, but by building that network and building that opinion board. Anybody can sell on Etsy from their kitchen table, so anybody can be an artist. You don't have to go to get an MFA to be an artist anymore in this new paradigm. So what really changed, and I'm thinking especially from my experience from the nonprofit sector, but I think it's just as applicable in the for-profit creative industry sector. What really changed is that institutions no longer have the monopoly as the brokers of art or the brokers of good taste, meaning that anybody can define what they like and they can buy it. They can go directly as a consumer to the artist to purchase the thing that they like. That does not mean that there is no place for institutions, however. We just may need to redefine it a little bit. And so that is the conversation we're going to have. The older value propositions from the first three paradigms The first one being old world craftsmanship and preserving history and tradition. The second one being art for art's sake and seeking a higher truth. And the third one being the professionalism and excellence and technique of artists. All of these things are still very important. I don't know a single nonprofit or for-profit organization that thinks these are bad. Do any of you think that these paradigms, value propositions are bad? We all think they're good, right? These are all good things. But we need to be thinking in the fourth paradigm, creative economy perspective. So again, I ask you about value propositions. Again, the definition of a value proposition is a positioning statement that explains what benefit you provide, for who, and how you do it uniquely well. The best place to look for value propositions for organizations is their marketing material. And you can summarize an organization's value proposition by their visuals that they put in it. So I pulled 3 that kind of talk about the 3 older paradigm value propositions. In the first picture there, what does this say to you? The black and white one. I put the black lines so you can see who it was. Nostalgia, history, tradition. Does it say anything about the creative economy? Does it say anything about the fourth paradigm? Okay, the second picture. It actually says art for art's sake. I love that. But what does it say to you? To me, it says something like, hey, you know what? You can come explore your inner creative genius with us. We can teach you how it's done. We can teach you the technique. But does it say anything about the creative economy here? And I ask because you can learn to play a ukulele on YouTube. You don't have to go to a place to learn how to play a ukulele. So how relevant is that marketing material? The third picture, I love this. It's only half of the full brochure, and the full brochure says, orchestrating excellence. And I love it because it is so serious and deep, it makes me laugh. It makes me think that these people are saying, see how hard we're working and how serious we are about bringing you great, excellent art. And it, I think, misses the boat on the whole idea of shifting to a creative economy, to a fourth paradigm perspective. So the truth is, the nonprofit sector may in fact be somewhat threatened by the idea of this creative economy and this paradigm shift. Nonprofits haven't fully embraced it because we don't fully understand it. I don't think anybody does. And we're led down this road because our funding, and I'm talking about us as in nonprofit organizations because that tends to be who I spend my days with, our funding is determined by funders who value sustainability, they value impact, and they value capacity. And so we spend a lot of time developing strategic plans and succession plans and legacy giving plans and economic impact reports and building new programs and new facilities and commissioning new work. But we're still thinking in a third paradigm context. We're not thinking in a fourth paradigm context. So what does that look like? And this is really a call to question more than a call to action. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I find this information really fascinating, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this, what you have to bring to the table. Here are some of my novice thoughts. I think we're all novices in this exploration of the fourth paradigm. So the question is, what does it look like for arts and culture to be a leading force in the 21st century city? And what is an authentic fourth paradigm value proposition for the creative economy? It occurs to me that part of what's informing this conversation is that we're seeing blurred lines between what have been traditionally very separate silos within the creative sector. So one thing is, we don't have patrons anymore, we have consumers. So the patrons expect you to curate something good for them. A consumer is more in the driver's seat. They're looking for what they've already decided is good. They're looking to curate their own lifestyle, their own identity by what they feel is good. Creative entrepreneurs, no longer artists, but creative entrepreneurs. These are no longer, I think, positioned as the beneficiaries of the nonprofit sector, but as fully fledged individuals who are versatile and capable business owners. We don't need to separate them from the sullying entanglements of the government or to insulate them from the market and the economy through our cultural bureaucracy. They're already there. So creative entrepreneurs, not treating people as starving artists, but treating them as fully fledged and capable business owners. Nonprofits and for-profits. It's a whole story we've talked about. Both business models can deliver the same good. And we're getting beyond the idea of the need for nonprofit and for-profit. You think about a theater company. You can deliver theater, put a piece on the stage, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit. So now all of a sudden, business models don't really matter. And perhaps we're more like creative nonprofits and creative enterprises and operating more similarly to each other. What really struck me about William Dee's thesis is he talks about all of these different facets of the creative economy as people who see themselves as some combination of all of these things. So how many of you in the room see yourself as a combination of two or more of these Venn diagram circles? Yeah, I do too. We're not pigeonholed anymore in the fourth economy context, or the fourth paradigm context. We are redefining a new value proposition. And I think it has something to do with the relationships, the networks, the tools, and the venues that we have at our disposal as creative economy members that make us catalysts for community development. And so some thoughts I have for you in the role of the creative economy and the new value proposition that we bring to the table. We can be a third space. We can be that place or that reason to bring diverse individuals together, either to define their own lifestyle or to come together to be an anchor of a social network. We hunger in this technologically savvy world, we hunger for human interaction. These are the types of organizations and institutions that can bring people together to be that anchor of real human interaction. Next, we can be incubators. We can provide solid, stable infrastructure that allows creatives to more safely try out their product, to embrace innovation, to take some risk, so that they can take more successful products to the marketplace. We've got very specific tools that we can bring to the table: venues, funding, business, back office business support. We can provide that incubation hub so that creatives can be more successful. And we can be connectors. We have the relationships and the capacity to unite and mobilize action in the way that nobody else in the community can as creative industries. We connect with diverse members of the community, and we can align behind common causes. Sometimes it's alignment with community direction and plans. In Fort Wayne, it's population growth, and by attracting and retaining talent. In Houston, it could be social equity. It's also about diversifying the economy. It occurs to me that Houston, in particular, has all of the building blocks to redefine the arts in this new paradigm. You've got diversified leadership, you've got cross-sector partnerships and alliances, creative economy data, and capacity for alignment around common agendas. And I think Houston's a city that's really going to be getting it right as we redefine this new paradigm. And I just want to end by thanking you all for the work that you're doing and contributing to this cutting edge or maybe bleeding edge sector, as we call it. So I'm going to finish my talk, and Sixto, you may need to help me a little bit, but I think we're going to use the business cards or the index cards. Okay, so we're going to take 5 minutes, and what I want you to do is answer the question on your index card of how does your business, organization, or you as an individual creative, how do you stay relevant in this new paradigm? What is your fourth paradigm value statement? So take 5 minutes. During that 5 minutes, I want to encourage you to have some table conversation to share. And then in about 5 minutes, we're going to do a few report outs. Sound like a good plan? Okay, go ahead and get started.
MFAs, BFAs, what have you. that don't call themselves professional artists, and we present them as the artists that they are. So that, for me, is really important work. And my other side, I get to do street art, which is directly getting art to the people that may not go inside those galleries, museums, institutions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all for your conversation, and I look forward to learning more about Houston and where you're leading Houston in the next 10 years and longer. Sixto?
Everybody, thank you very much, Susan, and it's a really wonderful. I think Susan has outlined a number of very exciting and interesting possibilities for us, and hopefully they're resonating